Hello and welcome to the Mystic Cast, where you join me, Jack Stafford, a student of metaphysics, as I talk to a variety of guests to better understand the teachings given by the masters through the Aetherius Society, the new cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, incorporating all yogas, Christian mysticism, theosophy, UFOs, and much, much more. Please note that this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, my guest is Dev Sandberg.
Hello, hi. Thank you for inviting me on, Jack. Nice to meet you, man.
It's my pleasure. No, I've heard a lot about you, and I've been checking out your YouTube channel, and it's yeah, I've really been learning a lot, especially about the breath work, because I do a lot of pranayama, and I do the holding of the breath, but there's a lot of exercises you're doing that I hadn't really heard about, and because I'm also trying to get the right posture, as I should sit up straight when I'm talking about posture now. So I was worried about the barrel chest, getting the right drop in the abdomen, breathe the diaphragm right. So maybe you could give me some tips as we go along. And I know the number of people who breathe properly, you can probably count on one hand, no?
Well, something to be aware of, Wilhelm Reich was the guy who created a lot of this stuff, and that was like back in the 30s and this kind of thing, like nearly a century ago. And his basic model was not so much like, okay, let's think about how we should be breathing or learning how we should be breathing from some model so much. It was more, his basic concept was that, we're repressing a lot of stuff, basically, from early childhood onwards, that any emotions that we can't process in the moment, even in the womb or as a little baby, as an infant, as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, they get repressed because the brain has this kind of defense mechanism to safeguard it. And that stuff gets pushed back into the body. And then with animals, our kind of nearest ancestors and stuff like that, they at a certain point, if that happens to them, then they will just release it. But humans have much more evolved frontal lobes. We have these big lobes up here in the prefrontal cortex. And so what happens to us is that we go through certain kind of traumatic elements of our childhood, and we come to a point where we could naturally release it, but our ego has already kind of developed and it just thinks, nah, I'll just hold it in, I'll just front it out, and this is the kind of, I'm being lighthearted, but this is the kind of mechanism that we go through. And so most people are going around with a lot of stuff held in their muscle system. And in terms of breath work, breathing strongly using these muscles around here, like the sternocleidomastoid or the scalenes. And those muscles don't really need to be involved in breathing. It's just that the prefrontal cortex, these big frontal lobes that humans have, they're like, they're almost in a constant negotiation with the amount of energy and feeling in the body to try and hold it down. So this whole area becomes like a battleground, kind of. So what I'm trying to say is really, it's not really about like, okay, now I'm going to try and breathe the right way. That's okay, but it's more like Reich was developing breath techniques to release some of the armor, because what happens is when there's a lot of repression is the body takes on this kind of armored shape. Either the muscles go very hardened in certain areas just to hold stuff in, or sometimes they just kind of like go super slack, like they're just not, they lose all their tone. All the awareness goes out of the muscle system. It's like, so Reich was really just trying to take out the blocks. Basically, he's saying, or as I understand it, we have a natural identity. Our mind cannot find that. It cannot find it because all it does is keep trying to work out who to be. But if you take the blocks out, then the natural identity will naturally kind of reassert itself slowly over time. That's the kind of model. So it's not so much like, oh, I'm going through graduated stages of development from my mind, from my understanding, from my thinking, my models that I've developed. It's more like, okay, I'm going to take out the blocks, and what remains will be more naturally me. It's like a trust journey working with the body.
Yeah, you explained it much better. Yeah. That bloody ego. Oh.
Well,
but it's all goes, when the things I've learned from different like Ayurveda and pranayama is, yeah, if you take out all the blockages and if you just let the prana flow, yeah, everything else takes care of itself. Don't be the block.
Yes. Yes. Yes, exactly.
So, because I've noticed everyone, we're curling into ourselves to kind of protect ourselves. No, we should hang like, I try and hang up, like not from like imagine I'm a abseiling and I'm being held up from here rather than a cord behind me holding me up as I walk around. No?
Well, I guess, it's also important to recognize that if we are, to protect the heart center, we will curl forward slightly. The shoulders come forwards a little bit. And, yes, you can certainly experiment with not doing that and with keeping, your chest more. Jordan Peterson, what did you say? Stand up straight with your shoulders back or something.
Yeah.
But like you can do that. But it's also important to recognize that, you're also in a state of protection as well. And there is there's something there that you're trying to protect. And that's also okay. It's not that you have to stay in that, but then just going to the opposite, it doesn't always work. It might work. It's not many.
So I've seen these exercises on your website. Maybe you could, as we progress, guide us through a few of these, because practice is so much better than theory, and I think I'll understand it more if.
Yeah. I mean, a core technique from Wilhelm Reich would be belly breathing, or sometimes he would do belly and intercostal breathing. So, I mean, I'm only wearing the shorts, but I can demonstrate it if you want.
Go for it.
I'm not planning this, so I've got a set. Let me just have a look.
Improvised. Look at you in your shorts showing off in Mexico there.
Yeah. Well, it's more like the light, because if the light's bad, then I won't really see anything. But let's just see what we can do. So for like basic Reichian belly breathing, what most people are doing is trying to breathe from here when they're awake. They're breathing and they're using all these muscles in trapezoid and the pectorals and the muscles around the neck and throat. And so a really good technique to learn is just lie on your back with your knees up, your feet about hip width apart and like a comfortable distance from your ass. And try to see if you can breathe solely by moving your abdomen, by moving your belly muscles, not using any of the muscles up here, but by keeping your airway kind of open. So your mouth is a little open, like relaxed, and you just try to relax your throat. And then what happens if you balloon your belly out like that, like making yourself fat, the lungs are naturally drawn down. And when they're drawn down, if your throat's open, air will just come into the vacuum. And then, so it's like pushing out, causes air to come in, and relaxing, the lungs come back up and the air goes out again. So you're actually breathing by using your abdominal muscles. When we say belly breathing, most people, when they hear the phrase belly breathing, even people working therapy a lot, they tend to suck big amounts of air into their belly, and that's not really it. That's a kind of different technique. This is just to.
So are you using your diaphragm there, or are you're really just using your belly?
Trying to use the belly. I mean, the diaphragm will move a bit as well, ideally. A lot of people are quite locked at the diaphragm, but particularly my lower abdominals, I've been focusing on the muscles. And just having this intention to pass to consciously breathe by using these muscles. It's quite a journey, I go through if you really don't use the muscles here at all, after a while, fear develops in the mind because it doesn't really trust the body to breathe.
Really?
Of course, you're consciously breathing. Yeah, because most people are just, trauma really, there's different models of trauma, but a big chunk of it is always not really trusting the body, and always having to be in control of it up here. And so, you're kind of using all these muscles here just in case your body doesn't breathe. But if you look at like a dog just lying down on its belly, you'll see it's breathing by using its belly. That's a relaxed way to breathe. Humans will use these muscles when they're being triggered, like a fight or flight reflex. Or if we're doing if you're down the gym or something like that, then it's natural to start using these muscles to breathe because you're trying to get more air in. But if you do that all the time, you're actually keeping your nervous system in a fight or flight response.
Yeah,
So you're not really allowing your body to relax naturally like it can, because we're just another primate at the end of the day. So like that's one basic technique that you can use to just practice with when you're on your own or lying down. Let me just put my little thing back in. Just like, simple belly breathing, basically.
Because was it like 95% of people don't use the diaphragm to breathe, they're just using the chest?
Yeah, I don't know the statistics, but there's nothing really wrong with using these muscles up here to breathe, but it's keeping you in a certain state which might not be ideal or optimal for you. It's like, so you can even there's lots of different models of trauma and psychology and stuff, but you can just look at it as simply being an overuse of certain muscle groups and an underuse of other muscle groups. So the belly breathing is more like something you could try daily, just as a practice, just to and it'll take a while for it to reestablish, because it's not what we've learned, and it's not what we've done. It'll take a while, but it can switch off a lot of the kind of trauma in the body by saying, and it gives you more, because you also have to focus on your belly and your belly muscles whilst you're doing it. You have to feel them. It brings your whole energetic center lower, so it's much easier to relax under stress. You almost have a kind of conscious access to de-stress, once you've got the technique, because it just pulls your whole awareness lower. Most stress happens. Stress is not really a problem unless people are stressed all the time. It's kind of normal to have a fair bit of stress, but if you can't de-stress at any time, then you put yourself at risk that you lose your resilience, and you can spin out or whatever, or just kind of break down, chronic fatigue, whatever.
Yeah, I know it's so important to breathe low, because it's the essence of grounding, isn't it? If you can, I notice that my breath is kind of my brainwave. So when I'm on the computer doing work, it gets shorter and faster and higher.
Yeah.
And I'm physically high. My whole body becomes stretching. I'm trying to breathe lower all the time, but yeah, when I'm engaged in another task, I haven't got it automatic.
Oh, for sure. I don't think many people do really. It's like, I don't, but if I'm working on the computer, I just take a break every now and again, and then just consciously, because you can just do it while you're just sitting here. You don't really have to move, just take your hands off the keyboard and just spend a minute breathing with your belly and feeling your body,
Yeah, I've done some meditation retreats.
Yeah.
Then suddenly
even though the Buddha, like the first technique he gave was like Vipassana or something when he was enlightened. Whenever I've heard anyone teach Vipassana, they never really tell you about actual using your belly to breathe with. It's like it's kind of overlooked. That to me is like the central aspect. But so it is.
Yeah, I've done a few of those courses, and they don't do anything. They don't tell you anything about anything, so that you're just watching the sensations that come. But I agree, because a lot of people come out of those retreats, they're still very as confused as they went in, because if you've got the monkey mind and it's the monkey's running the show, you can still be struggling for the whole 10 days, and then you come out none the wiser. It's better to do some training before, I think.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. But I guess they've got their technique and stuff, and it's been going for a long time. They do it their way, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, breath affects everything. Since I've been doing the practices over the years and just getting lower and lower, and I've noticed by the distance between my belly button and my nipples, I get this kind of stretching in the middle as I try to bring my chest up high. My chest, when I'm doing the meditation, it kind of happens naturally. I think my higher self takes over, and I try and stretch up. My rib cage opens, and I'm sitting up straighter and more comfortably. And then at the same time, I'm dropping my abdomen as I'm relaxing. Then there's this stretch in the middle. I'm going up and down at the same time. It's kind of, I come out a couple of centimeters taller.
Really? Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's because you're doing the belly breathing at the same time you're trying to sit up. you're sitting up. So yeah, there's because everyone, if you look at everyone, they're bent over, aren't they?
I don't know about everybody, but I mean, yeah, I mean, there's different, Reich wrote about, well, four, or depending how you look at it, five different kind of personality types that emerge from different types of childhood or slight genetic kind of inclination. Some people will crane, their head forwards, closing the chest, and it is kind of nipple reaching. This is oral. This is an oral character type.
Yes, pushing to reach something, like rushing
reach
through
a
life.
nipple. Basically, as a child, he had contact with the mother in the first year of life.
Wow.
Creates a kind of a deep sense of lack in the core of the psyche and an underlying belief that, like, no matter what happens, you're never really going to get enough. You're never really going to get enough. And then sometimes this kind of, because as teenagers, we tend to learn that being very needy, because such a person is very needy, is not really a good look. Like if you want to attract partners, being super needy is
I've
not
never liked that. No.
generally going to do the job. It's just kind of written into our DNA. So some people remain needy, and some people learn to armor it over and become more narcissistic or whatever, or they just give to other people all the time or something like that. It's like a core. It's a way of avoiding the neediness, but you actually have to learn to kind of get into the neediness on an almost sensational level in the body, and slowly allow it to process. Really, that's the oral type. Then you've got like what Reich wrote was a kind of schizoid type, whose body is very angular. That's what he originally called it. It's usually called like the leaving pattern these days, which means it can even come on in the womb, that the nervous system registers some kind of sense of unsafety as a fetus is developing, and awareness just comes more in the head. So everything becomes a lot of thinking and models and ideas, and this is nowadays called the leaving pattern. They tend to have kind of angular body, often can be quite strong, but very, very mind dominated, very hard to really just feel something, or whether the sense of a body or human emotions. That was another one of the types.
Wow. So it really just comes from childhood, even in the womb. Wow.
Yeah, in the womb. And then the third kind of major type was originally called a masochist, but it's usually called the endurer. And that emerges sometime around the age of 2, because when we're about 2, it's when we first get access to this word no. Like when you're 1, if your mum wants to go down the shop, she just kind of carries you or pushes you, you just go along, yeah, I'm going down the shops, but when you get to 2, you can kind of start to forge your own identity, and you do that through the use of the word no. So you start screaming and shouting and freaking out, it's just, your dad wants to go here, and you're like, it's freaking out all the time. And that's a healthy thing to happen, but some parents come down real hard on the kid, and determine they're going to get control. And because at the age of 2, you recognize it, if your parents are being hostile to you, that you're in a survival threat. So what happens is they tend to submerge their whole individuality, and they just go on a survival trip through life. They just literally try to survive. They suppress all their anger, and they're often quite good workers, loyal, but they gossip and complain a lot, but they never really want to change, because their initial experience as a child of having an individual self of was met with such strong resistance that, that the sense of fear is held in their system around just being themselves. So these are 3 kind of types that Reich identified as personality types. And I think most people really, especially in the West, we have a combination of the 3. We have a combination of 3 operating inside of a survival trip. The needy child and the kind of dissociated kind of person living in their mind, And so these therapies from Reich and then bioenergetics as well are more aimed at resolving that stuff and allowing people to develop like a more healthy kind of ego that's natural.
Wow. So is there like a catch-all solution, or you have to first be diagnosed?
I mean, even I have like a quiz that people can do to see what it's not perfect, but it gives you a basic idea of, from like, just answer questions about how you behave and stuff like that. And it gives you a little score at the end on which one's you're highest in. But there's not really a catch-all solution. Well, the catch-all solution over time is to feel the body more, because it's really the sensation of the body that's been discarded to a large degree. And we've kind of we focus a lot on thinking and thinking and thinking and ideas and concepts, and and to a limited degree sometimes on human emotions and heart-centered emotions, but just that raw sense of a body is kind of the most healing thing. If over time you can expand that, then it kind of picks up all the stuff that's repressed, all the stuff that's not working, and gives you just a more healthy kind of ego that can be kind of open but also grounded.
So how do you do it then? You sit long periods in silence, or what's the nuts and bolts of the technique?
I mean, most of the techniques that I teach, they do come really from a position of meditation, in that we're trying to feel the body. But instead of just sitting and kind of waiting for muscles to open and stuff to move, it's more like you put your body in certain positions, or you use certain breath techniques to kind of move it along a bit. So it's like, it is a meditative technique as I teach it personally. Not everybody teaches it as that. But it's like you're kind of taking a bit of action. So you're putting your body in certain postures perhaps, and breathing with your belly, or breathing in a gentle way, or whatever, and feeling the body, and slowly muscle groups open and release stuff that's held from the past. So it's kind of like a sort of mindfulness 2.0 in a way. It's kind of, you're not just sitting and waiting for stuff to process, you're also kind of helping it along a little bit.
So you go looking for the pain?
Well, it's not so much that you look with your mind. With your mind, you just try and stay present with a sense of the body, because that's what it's, and you just try to maintain the posture, keep feeling the body, and keep breathing a certain way. And over time, muscles start to open and stuff starts to move.
Because I mean, I've learned Padmasana, the lotus pose, over time, and that's just been years of agony.
Really?
Yeah. And then I swapped over with the other leg on top, and that was the year of agony. So was I doing the right thing, or was that?
Well, that's different, because that's coming from like yoga, basically, like an Eastern tradition, and I don't know I'm not an expert on that stuff. I mean, I can't do the lotus pose, man. I mean, if I sit for an hour, I usually have a little block like that or something. But I don't think that's really intending to, possibly it opens something around your base, but I don't think otherwise it's intending to move through repressed stuff. So what we'd be talking about, let me show another posture.
Yeah, let's get through it.
Yeah, let's just show something. So we might be talking about something like the arch posture, which really is just kind of, so from standing, you've got your feet about less than shoulder width apart, maybe a foot or 20, 30 centimeters apart. And from standing like this, you drop your chin to your chest, and then you slowly hang forwards, feeling your body the whole way. Like this. If you're quite flexible, don't go down so far that your fingers touch, keep them touch the floor. And if you're not flexible, then just go down as far as you can. And then in this posture, just try to breathe and feel your body. Trying again to breathe with the belly if we can.
And are you analyzing what thoughts come into your mind? Are you waiting for fear? Or?
No, you just try to remain. There's certain elements of the posture which is good to remember. Like some people do this and they hold their head up. This is like when you're used to controlling feelings a lot.
Yeah.
You lock the head up like this. So you kind of jiggle your head to make sure it's relaxed. Likewise, some people, the arms will pull like this. You're using like the circuit from the head down through the arms to kind of hold the pressure in. You don't want to do that. And then you straighten your legs, imagine your ass is pulling up. You keep a tiny bit of flex in the knees. And if that's still kind of quite easy, you can take your weight more towards the toes and the heels. Then you just try to remain tuned into the sense of the body and try to remain the breathing. So you've got the posture, you've got the breathing, and you've got the sense of the body. And that's all your mind has to do. So if a lot of thinking is coming or whatever, you don't need to pay much attention to that. You just try to stay tuned into the sense of the body. Because
what's the difference between that and yoga then? Is there an extra element?
I'm not an expert on the background of yoga, but I don't think it was originally created to release stuff from the body. I don't know, you'd have to discuss with some Vedantic scholar or something like that. But I don't see that in yoga. And often the feeling of the body, the deep feeling of the body is not so present. It depends on the style,
Yeah.
but it's not so present. And that's where it goes. I mean, a lot of people, I know a lot of people who do yoga. I do a bit myself, and it doesn't necessarily take out kind of the more basic kind of emotional blocks. I mean, it may do. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just
too quickly, you mean?
Different. That posture you'll see in yoga as well. Yeah. But there's a counter stretch which goes with that called the bow. Let's just see if I can shut this thing back. I should have said this one up a bit more. But like, what you're doing with that is having your feet at shoulder width apart, outsides of your feet roughly parallel, knees very slightly bent, and you just literally bring your arms right up, palms facing forwards, and then you press your pelvis forwards and you squeeze your arms back, keeping them straight behind the ears. And this posture, it's not that you have to get the posture correct, you just push in the right places. And then again, you try to breathe with your belly and remain feeling your body like. You just stay tuned into the sense of the body, and those two stretches together on like a 1 or 2 minute ding, so 1 minute of one, and then doing a few reps, it starts to open up the body and move a lot, Yeah. So it's a great aid to meditation, really, because it starts to, because a lot of thinking and a lot of attachment to thinking comes because there's so much stuff held in the body. When I mentioned like this schizoid type or the leaving pattern, the basic activity is that when a certain level of sensation in the body arises, it's like a subconscious mechanism moves a person into their mind, like an escape, like a safe place to go. Like if the house is dangerous, you just have a little trapdoor up to the loft, and you go and hang out there, and that process is kind of mediated subliminally. So people aren't usually aware of the sense in the body that's causing them to go there, but over time you can become more aware of it, and you just realize, wow, I've just gone massively into my mind now. I'm thinking about all this stuff or whatever, and a curiosity develops. Well, what's actually happening in my body that I'm going up here, So then over time you can slowly kind of come back down out of the loft and just really feel what's going on in the body.
Yeah, I've noticed my voice changes a lot, so when I'm very relaxed, I'm talking like this to you. But then when we get a bit excited now, if everything's up, I'm not in a balanced state now. You can hear from my voice how I'm just up here. It's all just the sound. It's just the sound vibrating out, isn't it? Let me bring it back down again for a minute. Just be in my belly.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also okay to be exuberant at times as well. It's like, but it's just like, it's like being, for me, it's like a ladder inside of different places you can come from. If you're hanging out with a load of guys, you might want to be more in that kind of base thing. And if you're having a more intimate discussion with someone, you want to be more in your heart or whatever. It's like,
you don't think you should be all the same?
I don't see the point. It's like, as social beings, we move through a lot of different situations, whether you're like meditating or partying or whatever, I don't think most people who, in my experience as a therapist, this is just my experience, most people who have a quite strong belief that they need to be a certain way, they've internalized a kind of, because we all have like an internalized voice of authority. Like in the old days of psychology with like Freud and stuff, they used to call it the super ego. This was like this controlling presence that kind of tells you what's okay and what's not okay. And, that also happens for people who are in spiritual fields as well. So now you're allowed to do this, but you're not allowed to do that. You've got to walk like this, but you can't walk like that. And it's not that it's totally useless, because it could motivate you towards looking deeper or changing, but it's also, I think, good not to be completely controlled by that presence for your whole life, because mostly it's just picked up from the culture in some way, or parents or something like that.
You don't think it's about like learning not to react and like to be equanimous in all situations, so that you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think it's good not to have to react, but if you are reacting inside, it's like a fine line, because you also want to understand what is the reacting about. If you've developed a strategy to cover overreacting, you know, then you might not, whereas actually, you know, it might be a bit of a, you might be worried that you're going to get expelled from your social group because you're like reacting like fuck or whatever, you know, even your spiritual group, you know, you're reacting and you think you're going to get thrown out of there. So you think, I've got to cover the reaction up and appear really calm. But on a deeper level, that might not be so useful, because then you don't get to understand like what actually was going on inside the reaction, because that could lead you into deeper self-awareness. If there's a certain person whose behavior or a certain type of behavior or situation which always triggers you, you know, ideally what you want to do is to be able to uncover that, you know, so that because it's probably pointing to a charge in your system, a charge of repressed energy. You know, say just anytime one guy in the group tells you what to do in any way, you just feel like, I'm not going to do that. You know, you can just feel that reaction, you know, and you kind of, and then there's a phase where there's a self-justifying phase, you know, like, yes, because he's doing this or he's doing that or he's like this. And then it can come to a phase where it's more like an inquiry, like, well, why does when that person do that or tell me what to do, or I think he's telling me what to do, or I'm interpreting it like that, why does it trigger me? And then it can be like, you know, you get whatever, whether there's a psychological reason relating to the dad or the mum, or whether it's just you need to let that, if that energy can come out of the system, repressed charge in the system can come out, you'll have more natural free energy and you'll have more self-awareness. So you don't really want to create a personality that covers over your psyche, because that will block your development, basically.
Yeah, but you want to be your real self in all situations. So you want to be, If you spoke to this about
well, you have a choice, eh? I mean, you have a choice, you know. It's like that's how I see it, like a ladder, you know. I think in some Christian texts they used to have the ladder, Jacob's ladder. Is that a metaphor for that? Like a ladder in the psyche, different parts of the psyche that you can come from in different situations.
I'll have to check that out. I didn't know about that. I know Jacob's ladder, but I didn't know it was.
Maybe, I don't know, it's a long time ago. I did study Kabbalah for a year or so once, but that was like 25 years ago, so I don't really remember it.
Because our mutual friend Francis, who, because you're in Mexico, he's done a lot of work from overcoming trauma and getting in touch with the body. And he was telling me the other day about how he was just in a cafe with a friend, and there was something come up, and he felt her getting upset, and he kind of felt it coming into his body, and he kind of felt the emotions, and then he kind of digested it and helped her out with it. Or it's kind of that, like, being embodied, because also in the Vipassana technique, there are all these sankharas, you know, on the aura, but you're saying they're also in the muscles. They're also this real tension that could be from that time that you were at school, or that time you're in the Cub Scouts, and you're embodying it still.
Yeah, everything that's not processed is right here now.
Right. Wow.
It might be a little bit beneath the surface, but it's still there. You know, it's still in your psyche. You may have learned behaviors to avoid getting it triggered. You know, avoiding confrontational situations or avoiding situations where you might feel vulnerable or whatever, but which are two classic ways. But like, you know, it's still there. It's still under the surface. You know, it's not processed yet. So if it's not processed, time doesn't really move on in a certain sense.
Yeah, because in his therapy, Francis was talking about how he has to do, did ayahuasca and many other things, and go in and talk to his 2-year-old self or his 1-year-old self, which is still in there, that just hasn't grown up and is still affecting his behavior on, just the way you interact with people on it. I guess our personality, I mean, they're all. But have you digested everything yet? Or do you get old emotions coming up? Do you get old memories coming up as you do it?
Well, I mean, I still have a lot of stuff that I carry around, and I tend to be a bit kind of half meditative and half extremely outgoing or kind of combative, confrontational, and it's not a perfect mix. I'm also mixed race, so I don't know if that's part of it, but I mean, it's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing journey. I don't consider that I've reached some space of great enlightenment about it or something like that. No, I'm more like just a regular human.
It's a mess, isn't it? Because if you have all this stuff from childhood and we're in a reincarnatory cycle, so we've got that stuff from the past lives, just layers and layers of plaque, mental plaque.
Yeah. Yeah, we carry a lot of stuff around. I mean, I think this domain is meant for processing, really. This physical is meant for processing. So some people who are, on a spiritual path, they actually take, I think, make too much of a kind of avoidance strategy to the world. Actually,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Because being in the world, in the marketplace of the world, is where most of the triggers are. In relationships, in love relationships, in friendships, in working structures where there's a hierarchy, like a normal company or something like that. That's where all the triggers are. So, in a certain sense, for some people, the real spiritual path is to be completely in that, completely in that. Because we can take ourselves away into a more rarefied environment where we find it easier to exist. But, at some point, I think we have to come back into the marketplace of life and face the triggers. Sometimes you need time away, and sometimes, spiritual people have the leaving pattern basically, but then at some point you have to come back. It's useful as well, but you can learn and connect with agencies, or you can learn stuff or develop models or whatever. But I think there has to come a kind of phase of embodiment as well, where you've kind of gone out of your body and into different realms, and then it's okay, now it's time to come back. Some people don't want to come back, is my experience sometimes.
It's also easy to get caught in the selfish trap. I know I've done that. You're focused on your own spiritual development. And it's also, many of these meditations, they don't help, these meditation schools, they do teach you to be more, they do think it's about your own personal enlightenment. That's what we're chasing, but really service to others. That's what you're doing with your teaching and everything, helping so many people, is because that's the way in these days, as it should always been, is to raise all the boats. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a bit more, I guess, traditionally more of a bodhisattva thing or something like that, rather than a kind of Buddha thing. It's like staying in the world, being real, and interacting with people and continuing your own journey. I mean, I used to hang out a lot with kind of enlightened people and stuff like this. And what I noticed over time was all they might not be identified with them, but the programs are all still running. All the unprocessed stuff is still running.
Well, if you've been in an ashram, it all comes to the surface now. People can be really bad with each other.
Well, and the masters themselves as well. Often, it's like you can have some kind of enlightenment experience where it's like, I think you don't have to attach to your mind so much, the thinking streams. There's a space between there. It's often what people describe going through that. But the reality is that all those patterns are still sitting there. Now, it depends how much energy is left in them and stuff, whether you act that out in the world. But, it's not straightforward. Often, I mean, when I was in a kind of more spiritual phase of going to India and sitting with teachers and stuff like that, what was really motivating me, I think, was a desire to escape from my underlying emotionality. It was like you see the teacher sitting on their cushion and you think, I want to be like that, and make money like that. Because, well, it was more like, if I can get enlightened, then I won't have to feel all the shit I'm carrying around, if I'm honest, and then that was the underlying part of the underlying motivation, not the whole part of it. There's also something pure and something that really wanted to experience something different in the ashram or in sitting with a teacher or whatever. But there was also for me that component of emotional avoidance. And, that is kind of, I mean, certainly in Buddhist ashrams, you usually will see that to some degree as well in some people, particularly with anger, because people who've got this endura type, like I mentioned, where their ego has been suppressed very strongly as a child, one thing they will tend to believe is that the ego is bad, or they'll become attracted to beliefs. Like some interpretations of Buddhism tend to say that you have to get rid of the ego. It's like a kind of, that may not be the deepest Buddhist teaching, but nevertheless, some of the kind of interpretations are like that. people with a strong enduro who had to submerge their ego as a child will tend to be attracted to that. Often also people who went to public school where there was a strong kind of hierarchy, English for non-English people, public school is like this school you pay for. It's really kind of full of rich people and it's kind of brutal, to churn out the English upper classes. It's very common that you'll hear upper class people who've undergone some spiritual experience talking about destroying their ego because they were, for a period of their childhood, immersed in a system where the masters or the top boys or whatever were trying to batter them, and so that's quite common, as a therapist to encounter that. But so this whole idea, I can't remember where I was going with this, but
it doesn't matter.
Okay, that's good. Happy you said that. But it's like I think what we do with the body is what I'm saying is like the patterns keep going. The patterns they keep going even if you've achieved some level of enlightenment and some stuff isn't there so much more. And also, it's like the ego is okay. It just you just need to take out some of the blocks and. And I think if it reaches a point where it's kind of ripe, then it will fall away of its own accord, like a fruit or something like that. That was a metaphor that Osho, the Bhagwan used to use, and I think it's an accurate metaphor. This whole any kind of journey where you're trying to suppress or stop the ego probably doesn't work that well for most people. I don't think you can make hard rules, like in the same way that like some monk who is just trying to not have sexual thoughts anymore, but hasn't really shagged around a lot, probably will find it harder than a monk who has shagged around a lot, basically, because things that you haven't done tend to have more energy than the ones you have because of the repressed charge. It's like, it's like it's more working with the ego, taking out the blocks, allowing it to move forwards, than getting into a position where you've got this super ego either trying to crush you from inside and you're being attracted to belief systems which are saying that crushing is okay or it's good, or it's trying to control you and make you really strongly a certain type of person, a spiritual person, or whatever. It's like that there's underlying psychological dynamics in a lot of those for people who are on those paths, and it's good to look.
Wow, I can tell you this teaching has really given you tools that you can use when you meet someone or when you're obviously teaching people. So when you meet young children, can you see which way they're going, and do you point out to maybe they can nip it in the bud, so to speak?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, we've all got our stuff to carry and act out. It's difficult, but I'm not a parent. I've never had kids, so I don't have young people around, super young people around me. I work a lot with people in their 20s, particularly men, some women, and that kind of thing.
Because I'm an expectant father, so I'm trying not to bugger up my kid.
Yeah, well, I think there's certain things you can try and do, which is have a good level of contact between the mother, if she's available, and the child for the first year. That's good.
I've got that one.
if you're a parent, and secondarily, when the kid starts to act out at age 2 or 3 and freaking out all the time,
lock them in the basement.
Sorry?
Lock them in the basement.
No, you need to hold safe boundaries with them, but you can't just let them do whatever the hell they want, because that will also create a thing where they're constantly trying to find boundaries, but you also can't just decide, right, I'm going to get control over this child now, I've had enough, no, you're not going to do, you can't be too strong. You have to find a way that the child feels it's okay to be me, but, screaming like crazy in the supermarket is also not okay. It's like, it's finding a personal kind of line somewhere in between.
It's just being a good parent, basically.
Yeah, it's just stuff to watch out for, because also there's been, on a deeper level, cultures exist and perpetuate themselves by certain specific types of child rearing techniques which traumatize kids. All cultures do this, all cultures, it doesn't matter how far back you go, as far as I know. And so, there is a lot of cultural conditioning on parents from their own childhoods and in the society around them, telling them what it's okay or not okay to do. But at the end of the day, you want your kid to have a healthy ego, basically to be a healthy human being. And so these three kind of patterns, which are kind of generally called pre-egoic in this school of psychology, you want to try and avoid those if possible. So the child has got a good start. And of course, it's not just the parents, or the society. Also, we have our own predispositions in certain directions, and so genetically or whatever, or karmically or whatever, So you can't be perfect maybe as a parent, but you can do your best, I guess.
We're all studying this, the birthing process, yeah, and how the hospitals in our area in Italy, they do a lot of cesareans. They're quite quick with the knife. And
Yeah.
even the best hospitals, they take the baby away sometimes for the whole night, for its first night in the world. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, another friend of ours, she just went for a birth, and she did a home birth with the obstetricians, and she's just fantastic experience. So they put the placenta, the baby came out, and then they give you a drug which puts out the placenta normally in a hospital, but she pushed it out later, and then they kept it attached for 24 hours. So placenta's in a bucket, and it's still attached to the baby, and it's skin on skin for the first few hours, and it's this constant. So the whole hospital environment might explain a lot of modern society. Just it's a brutal entry to the world.
It can be pretty, I think, maybe some stuff is safe and makes it a bit safer, but it's also got a kind of production line aspect to it. I don't know enough about it to make big judgments, but, yeah. You can also say that societies which are kind of repressive, probably, there would be an incentive to them to block ego development in the early years. There was an incentive.
Because I'm coming from England, as yourself, and now I'm in Italy, and just the difference. Like I was asking my mother, and she said that when I was newborn baby, I was in the other room, straight away. So whenever I was crying, she would go in, But to the Italians, that's like, the baby's in the bed with you now for the first year. So that really must, because the stereotypical Italian personality, stereotypical English personality, we're quite cold and distant, and so the Italians are all like this.
Yeah.
They are. So just that, these little things just steer you on that course, no?
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And for the Italians, the challenge is more to let go of the mother, particularly the boys.
Actually, in Italian, mamones.
The Italian men to really stand up, not be attached to them, not mangia mama the whole way through childhood, and to stand up and take a position for themselves, in opposition to what the mother in particular wants. That is a major challenge for Italians,
Well, I've seen some of the men here, they still have the umbilical cord attached. They don't actually cut it. So.
Kind of, yeah. Let me just plug my thing in a sec. So you're living long term in Italy, are you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've been here for 10 years now, and so just I'm now populating the country, so I can stay. Yeah, it's great. But I was in India as well, and I was doing the Ayurveda before, and I got into spirituality there, and then I joined the Etherius Society while I was there, via the internet. They don't even have much of a branch there, and so it's like you have these teachings which are really informing I was using them as tools. And so I'm also learning these ones from Dr. George King, who's the founder of the Etherius Society, and that that his service is the way to raise Kundalini in the modern age, because we're now in the Aquarian age, and he was the master for the Aquarian age, and Jesus was the master for the Piscean age. So he's a Bodhisattva, and in London he grew up. He did 10 hours of yoga. 8 hours yoga for 10 years, 8 hours a day after work.
Wow. Like, is he still around?
No, he is still around, but not.
Physically.
So he was probably the best one of the best breathers in the world ever. He could hold. I think one time when he raised Kundalini all the way to the crown chakra, and he didn't ascend. but he was a fully realized master,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, he held his breath. And one time when you raise Kundalini, you just keep a warm a band around to stop rigor mortis. There's a band around the head. I think stayed without breathing for like 24 hours. One time. So, and that's so service is the way to raise Kundalini advance in the modern age. So,
So like surrendering your own ego, basically, is what you're saying, like a sort of natural impulsiveness or that kind
yeah,
of
well, because when you go for your past life review, and each time around, no one ever goes in and say, if I just did more, if I just done, I'd suppress the ego a little more, and I just, well, I guess they're doing that subconsciously, but I wish I'd just done more practices, and they're always just regretting about service to others, about if I wasn't such an asshole, like if I'd just done helped more and more people, if I could only go back, so yeah, we do all this breath work, we do all this mantra, we do all this meditation, we do all these practices so we can, in the morning, get us out for the day, and keep awareness throughout the day, just so we're not an asshole, and we can go in service to others. And that's really the teaching that's guiding me through my life.
Yeah, interesting. So what was the guy's name again who founded it?
Dr. George King.
Dr. George King. So people can be listening to it from my side, and they can look him up. And the Etherius Society, yeah?
Yeah, the Etherius Society. So he was the voice. He has two roles. He was kind of like a Jedi, so he projected astrally into the etheric realms, and he took on the dark forces. That was his primary mission. But he was also the voice. So he would go into samadhi, and he would bring forth these teachings from other masters. You know how all these people channel, yeah, like we have many channel teachings. The law of attraction and law of one and things like that. So, but with being a medium, you get the person on your level. I can talk to you, but I can't talk to, because it's too much energy to come through, would fry the nadis. So a lot of those teachings, you get to the person who is on your level. So to channel a cosmic master, you have to be able to get up there, So he was able to do that because he incarnated on this earth for a cycle to do that. So yeah, he was the voice. And so just you about the law of one, all those teachings, but
I heard of that. Yeah, I never read it. Yeah.
But the stuff that he came through was so he was either a medium or a genius, because it's so deep, those teachings. It tells you what happens after, because with Buddhism you think you're going to nirvana, but with the Etheric Society it tells you that you go after ascension, you can decide to stay on in the spiritual hierarchy of Earth and the ascended masters, or you go to another planet, another classroom, and then you do your work there. You learn, and then you go to Saturn, and you learn, and then you go for solar existence, and then eventually you become a planet. You merge with other people, and then you eventually form a sun, merging, and then you become a galaxy. But even galaxies can't go back to God because you haven't transmuted matter. So it's this whole evolutionary spiritual path that tells us that, because you think the Buddha just, became enlightened and wham, bam, I did it, guys. But there's still so much to go, and
yeah. But what do you think about sort of all the stuff that's going on in the world with the war and COVID and all of that kind of thing? Does the Etheric Society have an opinion on it, or do you have an opinion on it?
Well, so he did he took on the dark forces. So he transmuted Satan, who split his aspects into 3 different consciousness, but there's still a lot of like magicians down there, and they control they run the show, you know, in this world.
Mm.
They're, because, you know, there's these different realms of existence, you know, the astral realms are right here between my hands, but it just, when we die, we go to a different frequency of vibration. So, you know, I could be on you could be on the higher planes, it could be a mountain here, or the lower planes, it could be an ocean here. So everyone goes to the realm of just desserts. Each chakra is a realm of consciousness, and you go to the realm where you're most comfortable at, and then the lower realms are, yeah, for the people who, as you get further down, the more involved, and the above is more evolved. And so, and the people who are very, this like as above as below, the black magicians are are brilliant in their, you know, they're like the ascended masters, you know, they're a mirror image. So you have these ascended like Saint-Germain and the Count Saint-Germain and people like that, and the great spiritual, you know, the masters from the Theosophical Society, you know, these, and there are the people who've used, you know, said mantras, who've done things in reverse and done these involved themselves, put a lot of effort into it, and extended their lifespan. And they because, you know, in the astral realms they can still influence the physical realm. So so yes, and they're allowed, because of our collective karma is so bad, that they're allowed to do that. So because that's how God manifests as the law of karma. That's what we're taught. So
Yeah, I mean, interesting. You know, I mean, what I see myself is like, you know, it's kind of, you can go into the good and evil kind of dichotomy, or whatever you call it, duality. But also, like, you know, when I looked at, say, COVID as a therapist, and having done a lot of sort of very heavy workshops around authority in particular, is that, you know, you're living out your life and you're doing your thing wherever, the UK or whatever, and suddenly you're being told to wear a mask, and you've got to go on lockdown, and you've got to get injected with some vaccine. And the primary issue that it brings up is around authority. It's around authority. It's around being told what to do and having a significant degree of social pressure applied to you to comply. So that's also a psychological issue. You know, it relates a lot to our relationship with authority as a child, you know, to our relationship with our dad, who may have been kind of absent, working away in the industrial economy or whatever, so there's always, like, it's not like the good and the bad are sort of absolute values. It's like there's always angles you can work. You know, authority is a very deep issue in my experience. It's just very, very deep in the psyche, and people can do a lot of self-development without actually touching it. And so, you know, having events like COVID come along on a certain level, very, very useful, because it does give people who are open to it a chance to say, wow, all through my life, I never really liked telling me what to do, you know, that old boss I had or whatever. And it's like, they can start to self-investigate what's going on inside of them, you know, not that there's a pat answer. And there's also people, of course, who learned as children to simply comply with authority in order to survive, you know, but this whole kind of huge, very deep dynamic is coming to the surface.
yeah. Well, I think COVID was, as far as world crises could have gone, in my humble opinion, it was a good one to have, because, you know, with a war, as like in Ukraine, you know, it's terrible, and there's bombs, and it's much more indiscriminate, you know, the suffering, everyone in that area. But with COVID, you know, everyone kind of suffered to their degree. You know, you could have had a year watching Netflix and been the happiest, having a break and spending time with a family or whatever, you know, or you wrote that book that you'd always wanted to write, or you just suffered in incredible ways. But there was all like self-imposed. We all had it was like being on another realm. No, it was like on the micro scale, we endured our own personality. And there's many people in Italy who got the vaccine just because they didn't want to spend, because if you got the virus, you had to spend 2 weeks alone with yourself, and that was the worst thing they could imagine. So whereas I had a great time, you know, I started podcasts, it was the best time of my life. I had more time. My girlfriend at home. We had lovely walks. We had, oh, it's fantastic. So, because I'm a privileged white man. I mean, I've been freelancing for 20 years. I'm self-sufficient in my income, you know, and I'm, you know, you're in Mexico, so you went over to, you had a great time too, no?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was challenging for me at first because I was super into the whole conspiracy scene about 25 years ago. I used to go and see David Icke and stuff like that, and I was really in it, you know, and all the alternative theories. And so that got woken up again because I kind of worked through a lot of that and tracked it back to my adoptive dad, to be honest, and my relationship with him. And I kind of worked through it, but it all got triggered up again for the first few months. And then, I don't know, I felt much more okay with it. You know, I did pass through another level of authority trips inside of myself, I think, and just felt more okay with the situation, really. Got off social media for about 9 months and then got back on it. And yeah, then middle of last year, thought, well, it also made it, at the time I was running a lot of workshops, which had to stop, you know, physical workshops in places. But I also was doing a bit of work online with courses, you know, online courses, because these kind of therapies can be taught through just video courses and with some support. So I kind of stepped that up a little bit. And, you know, yeah, it certainly for me personally, it worked out pretty good. You know, it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, that's great. It's what life is. You make your own reality, eh?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's believing or self-belief, isn't it? Somewhere to feel like, okay, I can go out and do something different. I can have a different kind of life from that which the people around me or the perception I had was.
I was never into the conspiracy theories before, you know, partly because it was uncool, you know, the media had said, and everyone had said, but then everything really came out of the closet now with COVID. It really was so, you know, it was so clear that there was manipulation purely on the media level, you know, whether that's obviously the dark forces running everything, and they want two sides. They want the anti-vaxxers against the vaxxers. They want you can't play on a pitch without two teams, can you? So there needs to be this conflict. If it's just all of us, there's always been the elite, you know, and then the blacks against the Ku Klux Klan against the blacks, or the poor against the other poor. It's never all of us against these tiny elite, is it? Otherwise they would be knocked away.
Yeah, I guess so. And also, you know, it's like, I don't know, a position I came to with a lot of my own work around authority was like, all line is someone's going to be in charge and actually probably not having that great a time anyway, you know? It's like,
you think Putin's happy now? You think he's having a really nice, you think he's super relaxed, Putin? I mean,
Putin? Well, Putin, I mean, I don't know so much. I mean, I was in Ukraine.
How's his breathing now? I mean, he's
well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I try not to read so much of the Western stuff, and my Russian's abysmal, so I don't bother with any of the Russian stuff. But, you know...
Pressure. He's under pressure.
Well, pressure, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know. He may just have a plan that he's following. I mean, a lot of power has shifted to the East, militarily and economically, over the last couple of decades. And so, you know, what I see is that even in amongst the sort of spiritual New Age people in the West, there's still an awful lot of colonialist thinking and an awful lot of cultural imperialism going on. Just as bad as with the World Economic Foundation or whatever, you know, Istanbul Forum or whatever it's called, you know. There's an awful lot of colonialism because the West has been in a position of financial, economic, military advantage for thousands of years. And that is now shifting. China are very, very powerful. China and Russia are getting much closer than they've ever been in their entire history. So, but there's a huge shift, and the Western media, of course, just want to sell newspapers or sell airtime. So in order to keep the average Westerner engaged, they have to present it like a wrestling match with a good wrestler in white and the bad wrestler in black, you know.
Yeah, very true.
I don't know what Putin's state is like. I wouldn't be surprised if Putin's relaxed. You know, I don't know, because there's a lot of bullshit. You know, it's like, it's complex as well. You know, if you know the history of Ukraine in the last 100 years and Stalin and stuff like this, it's very, very complex. But you know, I don't see it certainly as just a sort of good versus evil battle, you know, and I think for the average Westerner, because I was watching an interesting video the other day. David Fuller has this thing called Rebel Wisdom. I think it used to be a Channel 4 channel. It's kind of popular. And he really picked up a good point. Well, not him so much, but the guy he was interviewing, some Russian expert or something like that from the West. And he said, you've got to understand with Eastern cultures like Russia and China, these are cultures of the we. They're cultures of the we. It's about what the group needs, not me, my ego, what I need. Whereas America and Europe, you've got cultures of the I, cultures of the me, basically. And that really, I kind of knew that, but that wasn't in the front of my mind, and it's like, that's a very interesting lens to look at this kind of conflict through, the we-based culture with its hierarchical structure as well, and the father figures or mother figures or whatever, and the kind of the I culture on the other side, it's things are shifting, and so, yeah, I mean, whether Putin is best or not, I don't know, but I don't think it's so simplistic as just to say Putin is bad. And then again, the friends I've got in Kiev who are getting ready to fight Putin, of course, they're not going to go around. It's not in their interest to go around thinking Putin's a nice guy. They want to kill him. So that's how it is actually in a war.
Was that episode of Rebel Wisdom with Larry Lackland, who was there?
I don't know. Was that? It only came out about a week ago.
Yeah, because I looked at it because I was reading his book about Adam Blavatsky.
Okay.
He was the guitarist in Blondie way back.
Really?
Now he's an occult writer, and he has
right.
a theological occult.
What's his name again?
Gary Lackland.
Gary Lackland. I thought the guitarist out of Blondie died.
Gary Lackman.
Must be a different guitarist out of Blondie, because didn't the first one die?
Yeah, the one he's definitely still alive. Yeah, is this him?
This one's still alive, I know, but like Chris Stein or something.
Lost his hair.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right in the punk days, but yeah. Okay, well, it must have been him. I wasn't really watching it. I was just listening to it on Spotify, so I wasn't looking at the guy's name and stuff. But that was what kind of intrigued me. I mean, they didn't mention like Stalin's purge of Ukrainians, which is what's underneath a lot of it. But like, it's like, this we versus me thing. It's very difficult for the average Westerner to even, we kind of stay in the me position and then posture about how we are, how much a we person we are, and we're doing things for society. But you don't actually, until you actually live in like a social credit system or something, you don't know how much of a we person you really are. It's like that until you actually live communally, or whatever, you don't know how much of a we person you really are.
I think he said in that interview also that that's the Soviet idea, the communist idea, didn't really fit in with the Russian psyche. It was that kind of imposed on it. The actual Russian is much more spiritual. The Orthodox Church is they see themselves as the real carriers of the Christian flag, man.
Yes. Well, certainly the communist idea didn't fit in with the Ukrainians. I mean, that's pretty clear, because Stalin ended up like starving about 6 million of them to death, basically, in the early 30s, and that's why they kind of wanted to join with the Nazis when Hitler rose to power and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's all history and complex stuff. But I just kind of hope it comes to a resolution without too much bloodshed, because there's so much bad blood between the two of them now. It's going to be very difficult for anything, anything positive to really happen. The best you can hope for is some kind of standoff that they both can have respect for each other on some level.
Wow, it's just crazy that a small number of people, actually the elites, a small number of people decide they're going to take their army into another country, and then if you took a vote on it in Russia, you wouldn't get a vote to invade, would you? It's just,
well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it depends on. Again, it depends. If you look at the rise of Hitler, he was using spiritual imagery all the time. And Wilhelm Reich, this guy I started with, he wrote a book about this, the mass psychology of fascism. It's complex. It's very complex. I would say probably, Putin had some conversations with Premier Xi in China and basically said, the West can sanction as much as they want. It's probably not going to hit us that hard. We've got our own networks. We've got our own supply chains. We can actually start to divorce ourselves from the West. We don't need to be, the lower dog in the yin-yang symbol anymore. We can be on equal or superior terms. And that's probably, I imagine, why the invasion actually took place, because Putin's been on that border for years, and West have been provoking. The Americans have totally been provoking for well over a decade. But unfortunately, it's like provoking. It's like a sort of frat house brat in America provoking a load of Navy SEALs. You don't actually want. You may have started off very strong with a lot of your mates, but now they've all gone, and you're just left provoking a bear, basically. It's like, it's all complex and it's all chess games and stuff, I think. But I just hope it can come to some form of resolution.
Well,
I don't think the wars really achieve very much very often in this.
It's just the dark forces just playing chess and just stirring the pot, and they'll start something else. There'll be something else after. There'll be something in the South China Seas. There'll be something against Japan. They've got to keep. This is the game we're in. This is the game they're playing. So we have to fight it with, because there's a spiritual energy crisis. We have to project our energy to them and love. And
well, that certainly helps. I think that people don't get too engaged, but as Wilhelm Reich said, at the end of the day, it's not about the leaders. It's really not about the leaders. He refused to kind of blame Hitler, even though he actually fled the country because of Hitler. He said it's much more to do with the average person and where the average person is at. And in reality, it could take up to another 20 world wars before we get to a place where the average person can really, there's enough people who can actually let go because they've processed enough stuff. It's unlikely to happen in the short term. And so that was an answer to a sort of question about why he never compromised in his work. And, he ended up dying in prison and this kind of thing. He got attacked by the FDA and stuff like this. He said, well, there's no point in compromising. You have to keep experimenting while you can, because this may well take thousands and thousands of years to work out. That's the reality of it. That was his position. But I kind of see it more like, empires politically.
I mean, but we had Atlantis before this. We destroyed ourselves there. We had Lemurius before then. Lemuria, the civilization, we destroyed ourselves, and then before this we were on Maldek, which is now the asteroid belt, because we blew it up with nuclear weapons. So can wait for these guys to fuck it up again.
Well, I don't know. I don't really hold with this blaming the elite thing. My thing is more like, personally for me, there'll always be someone running stuff. They're probably not having that great a time. It's like, what's being triggered inside of me by these things, and to really go on an investigation with that. Because, like I say, authority is an incredibly deep psychological issue. It's written into the DNA very, very deep. Most Westerners have a childhood where they either learn to submit to authority to survive, or they fight in their mind. They surrender physically because the dad is bigger or mum is bigger, but in their mind it's like, you're not going to get me, you're not going to get me. And that type will be brought to the surface very quickly by situations like COVID, and you can process it. But end of the day, someone's probably going to be in charge, and ideally they're more loving, as well as holding lines, but it's still a processing possibility. And I think, I don't see that just working with groups for a long time, I don't see the average person ready to really look inside. It's very, very rare, very, very rare, because a lot of our defenses are unconscious. So we're not even conscious of avoiding or escaping. I'm no different from anybody else in this. It's like, it's very, very difficult to get beyond that. There's certain bugs in the human brain, basically.
The biggest problem I notice is the apathy, is that people just kind of staggering through life. And it's amazing what one person like Dr. King did so much, or you kind of get the leader you deserve, really, in some respects.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, my dinner's ready, so.
Yeah, we're getting into it. Yeah, well, it's been lovely to have a chat with you, Jack, and also
great to connect. Yeah,
your side of where you're coming from and things like that. Respect, man.
Thank you. Give my regards to Francis.
Yeah, I will do. Cheers.